All right, thank you very much. Welcome to the Naples Mac User Group Wednesday meeting, April the 21st. We welcome all of our members from throughout the world and throughout the United States and Canada. These meetings take place every single Wednesday until June 30th. Then we take a couple months off and restart in September. And you must be a member of Naples Mac User Group to attend our Zoom meetings, and it's because they are Zoom meetings, so we have to be more concerned with security. We have about 42 weekly meetings a year. We have some special guests today, the patrons of MacMost, and we welcome them to our meeting, and we're very glad you could attend, and we had the opportunity through Gary to invite you. Make sure everybody to please visit our Naples Mug website. We are very, very proud of it. We're very excited about it. We just converted over to our new website, and we're getting rave reviews, and I think you'll enjoy it if you take a look at it. And all of the information regarding the group is available on the website. Also, all of our meetings are listed on the website. Here's an example of the May Wednesday meetings. On May 5th, Sheeta Hunter will be doing basically a Q&A session on all Apple devices. On May 12th, we'll have Carrie Rigo, who will be covering social media platforms that are perfect for seniors. On May 19th, Bob Kennedy will be doing a meeting on photos. And many of you have attended his meetings in the past, and they're outstanding. And then Jim Corsica will be doing one on the Apple TV. And the Apple TV, that's one of the new items that was announced yesterday. So Jim is very excited. Just to mention, on Sheeta's meeting, which is on May 5th, if you have any questions, please email them to Sheeta as soon as possible. Questions, answers at iCloud.com. And that way, Sheeta will have some time to prepare the answers. The meeting next week on the 28th is an identity theft expert of Southwest Florida, Carrie Kursky, and she will talk about how the pandemic, the COVID-19 impacted fraud, scams, and cyber threats. And it should be a super duper meeting. She's spoken to the Mac user group about 4 or 5 times, but now through Zoom we are able to have her meeting exposed to our world members. All right, Gary, we're thrilled to have Gary with us today. I consider Gary the real Apple genius. And welcome aboard. Thanks for coming, and it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so this is really good timing for this meeting, right? Because we had all these announcements yesterday, and particularly, of course, all of us being Mac users, I would imagine, really exciting to see a new iMac yesterday. I mean, it's not just a new iMac. I mean, it's a whole new iMac. Looking at the designs of the iMac over the many years since it first came out, I mean, I think this is the biggest jump in design since they went from that G4, the one that had kind of the sphere at the bottom and the stalk with the screen, to like the idea of this big flat, computer that was on a stand. This is kind of the biggest jump because, I mean, it's so thin. I mean, it looks like an iPad. It looks like a 24-inch iPad that's on this little stand, which I think is probably what, when they came out with the G5 iMac, the first iMac that was all like the whole computer behind the screen, that was probably what they were really thinking. It's like, how can we have the iMac just look like it's just a screen? And hide everything else. Um, and I think they've finally gotten there, or they're really close now. They still have a bit of a chin at the bottom of it, but it's this really thin screen. It's only 10 pounds, which is kind of impressive. You think, it's a 24-inch screen. I mean, there are probably 24-inch screens that are 10 pounds just by themselves. So it's a really cool looking device. I'm really jealous. I don't use an iMac because I've got a Mac Pro, and I've had Mac Pros for a long time. And before that, I had, other various Macs. I never really had an iMac, but I've always been jealous of how nice the iMac looks. And so the design is new. It's got colors are back again. So, for a long time, we just, had the basic white or, aluminum. But, the original iMacs had all these colors. And now we're back to that with 7 different colors. Um, I, it's interesting looking at them. I couldn't imagine getting any other one except maybe the blue. but, um, I suppose if your favorite color is yellow or green or whatever, and you really want that one, then there you go. The display is pretty impressive because, previously we had a 21.5-inch screen and a 27-inch screen. And this one's kind of right in the middle. It's a 24-inch screen, and it's a 4.5K screen. So it's basically has more pixels than a 4K screen, which is what I'm looking at now. I use every day a 4K screen as my main screen. So this iMac actually has more pixels than that. It's still in the 1080p, ratio. So 16:9, ideal for viewing and editing 16:9 video content, which is great. They finally upgraded the camera to 1080p. For a long time, we were getting new Macs still with 720p cameras, which are passable for, FaceTime, I guess. But, really it was about time that they moved up to 1080 as a standard. Uh, it's got the M1 chip, which is what everybody wanted. So that's great. And it's now that's, pretty tried and tested chip, since people have been using that in the MacBook Air, the low-end MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini for months now. So it's great to see that in there. And it's going to have all those benefits that everybody, if you've been jealous of, hearing people with MacBook Airs that outperform Mac Pros, then, you'll be able to get that now in an iMac. Oh, and some other cool stuff. There's a magnetic adapter, right? So you have a power cord that attaches magnetically, which is nice. And it's got Ethernet through the power cord. So the Ethernet actually attaches to the power supply, which is great because it means you could just have one cable going from your Mac out. And then on the floor, you can have the, Ethernet cable going out from that if you need it. You've got, 2 Thunderbolt ports, which are nice, and then the kind of enhanced version, the version that's $200 more, that has 2 Thunderbolt ports and then 2 regular USB 4 ports. So you can't use those for Thunderbolt, like attaching like a Thunderbolt display or a Thunderbolt drive, but you can use those for most things that people use those USB-C ports for. The keyboard has Touch ID, which is really exciting because for the longest time, we had no Touch ID on any Mac where the keyboard was not permanently attached to the device. So, you had Touch ID on your MacBooks, but not on an iMac. So they figured out how to do Touch ID securely, but wirelessly. My guess is that the Touch ID button is actually just sending the fingerprint data to the Mac, and inside the Mac, that's where they're doing the actual Touch ID secure stuff. And the colors with those keyboards also. So that's really exciting. What's really disappointing for me personally is that the new keyboards with Touch ID only work with Macs that have an M1 processor in it. So eventually, we'll probably be able to buy those keyboards and attach them to the new Mac Minis that have M1. But my Mac Pro, my $9,000 Mac Pro, which has Intel processors in it, will probably never support a Touch ID on a keyboard. So I'll have to wait till I get a M-class Mac Pro at some point in the future to use Touch ID. I love Touch ID, and it's one of the, strangest things that my cheap little MacBook Pro, I can do Touch ID with my finger, but then I sit down on my expensive Mac Pro and I have to type my password in. So there's that. The pricing is good, $12.99 for the base model, $14.99 for a slight upgrade. And then you can go up from there. We don't know the prices yet on the upgrades, but you can go up to a 2 terabyte drive and there's might be some other things, but probably that's about it. It's just storage and memory. You can go from 8 gigs to 16 gigs of memory. So you have one of those two options. So April 30th, that's when their sales page will go live, and we'll be able to click the configure button and then see exactly how much does it cost to go from 8 gigs to 16 gigs, or from 256 gigs to 2 terabytes and all of that. But it looks really cool. It's really exciting that they've upgraded that, and Apple continues to move forward. Speculation now, just based on like things that I educated guesses on my part, my own rumors kind of thing, is I think they might be done now with the M1. Like the M1 went into the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, and the low-end Mac iMac. So everything that's left is a little more pro level. You've got the MacBook Pro, the higher end 13-inch MacBook Pro, and the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and you have a larger iMac, probably something with maybe a 30-inch screen is the rumor. And since we went from 1.5-inch to 24-inch, it makes sense to go from 27 to 30-inch. These are all kind of pro level machines. And they also discontinued the iMac Pro, which tells me that they really want to brand maybe the 30-inch iMac as more of a pro model. My guess is it's going to be a new processor for those, because the current M1 processor seems to only support 8 gigs and 16 gigs of RAM. So I would guess there'd be an M1X or M2 that will support up to 32 gigs of RAM, perhaps have 16 cores in it, or maybe just 8 cores, but 16 GPU cores. And that would go into a larger iMac and the more advanced MacBook Pros. And we'll see that maybe announced in June at Worldwide Developers Conference, or it might be fall. But for everybody that's waiting for one of those, I expect those to be significantly more expensive. Like I expect those MacBooks maybe to use the mini LED that's in the new iPad, and maybe the same thing, it's it's going to be a 6K screen probably in that larger iMac. So with that, and with the new processor and with more memory options and all that, we're not going to be seeing prices like $12.99 or $14.99, or similar for the MacBooks. We're going to be seeing prices that are like $2,000 or above. So if your thoughts were, oh, I'll wait for a bigger iMac screen, also consider it's going to be a whole different price level, probably. That's all speculation on my part. So, but that's the questions I'm getting asked a lot. So I wanted to address those. Let me look at some of the questions here. So I think the 27-inch will be replaced by a 30-inch or 29-inch or something bigger than the 27-inch. And it might be a 6K screen, and it might be a totally different processor, not totally different, but the next level up of these M-class processors. Will docks be needed? Well, if you get the higher end, the one now the iMac with $14.99 price, then you've got 4 ports on it. So, I mean, do you need more than 4 ports? Then you need to get a dock. I do so many things wirelessly now that I don't really use that many USB connections anymore. So I don't have any dock with my Mac Pro, and it has, what does it have? It has 6 ports, but I have an archive drive. I've got 2 different webcams and a external microphone, things most people don't have. Let's see. The memory is definitely not upgradable in any of those. Any new Mac moving into the future, you can expect no RAM upgrade, things. It's going to be built-in RAM. Now, as far as buying 16 or 8 gigs, well, I've got this M1 MacBook Pro that is 8 gigs of RAM. I bought that easily because I've got the Mac Pro with 48 gigs of RAM, so I didn't have to worry about how much RAM was in the MacBook Pro. It's just my second Mac. It's my travel Mac. It's the one that sits with me on the sofa. But I tell you, I've thrown everything at it I can think of. I mean, number spreadsheets that have tens of thousands of lines with complex calculations, iMovie rendering 4K video with transitions, all this stuff, and it doesn't seem to break a sweat. I mean, I'm talking about like, I can't even remember if I've ever gotten the fan to turn on my MacBook Pro, let alone, taxing it, with how much memory's in it. So it seems like these M-class processors are really good at handling RAM. And, when I hear people saying, oh, you won't be able to run iMovie on an 8 gig iMac or 8 gig MacBook Pro, it's like, I do all the time. If I'm going to edit video on my M1, I'm doing it in iMovie. And believe me, I'm not being kind to what I'm giving it. I'm giving it stuff to process. and it doesn't seem to have any problem with it. And that's like, I'm not quitting all the other apps either. I'm like Safari with a bunch of tabs and mail and, a bunch of other apps open because I never close apps. I just leave everything running. And my 8 gig machine runs perfectly fine. So 16 gig if you really think you need it and you have the money for it. But 8 gig seems to be fine for what I'm using it for, and it's pretty good. So no there won't be any upgrades. Apple doesn't seem to be going with any of that. Like, it's wiring that stuff in. I mean, look at how thin that iMac is, right? There's no room for anybody to go in and open that up and put a stick of RAM in there. That RAM is soldered on. So the other thing that Apple announced yesterday, which is exciting, but it's not a Mac, is the iPad Pro. So this is really cool. And the big surprise for me was that it's using an the M1 chip, the exact same chip that goes into the Mac. So when an M1 chip rolls off the production line, it could be going to an iPad or to a Mac. It's the same chip. This is interesting because everyone predicted it would be like an A14X, it's a special, upgrade of like what was in the last iPad Air and all, but it's going to be the same chip, which is really neat to think about. It's got the same processor capability as a Mac, exactly the same, literally the same, because it's the same chip. So that's really interesting. And that's probably what enables it to have Thunderbolt off of the port. So it's got still the one port, but it's Thunderbolt now rather than just USB. Well, technically it was USB plus DisplayPort because you could actually connect a screen with that. Now it's true Thunderbolt. So you can do like, say, a Thunderbolt drive off of the iPad Pro. And that's probably that's why they probably went with the M1 chip. The M1 chip knows how to do Thunderbolt, whereas the A14 whatever probably doesn't. So it makes sense. And also, I mean, if Apple can mass produce M1 chips and M1X and M2 chips and all of that, they can really bring the price down on them, right? Why produce a bunch of different chips if they can produce one chip and use it in all these different machines? Then it gets cheaper for them to make, and the prices can come down or stay down at least on all their things. iPad Pro's got the great screen too, that mini LED that everybody wants. People are talking about. It's called XDR, extended dynamic range. I think that's what it is. So that's what they're calling these mini LEDs. That's really cool, and I expect to see them moving forward. So I wouldn't be surprised if new MacBook Pros have the mini LEDs in them as well. And eventually they're just everywhere. That's how Apple kind of does it with screens. They introduce something new like True Tone or some brightness technology or whatever. And then, it's really cool for a year because it's in this one machine. And then before you know it, like everything's got it. The prices stay the same. It's got a new ultra wide camera in the front, and they're going to use that to track you. Like it's going to basically capture a really wide angle. And then if you move, it'll recenter all the video over. So it looks like the camera's panning, even though it's static. That's kind of neat. Also, you can go up to 2 terabytes of storage on the iPad Pro, which is really impressive. I guess if you do want to use it for like your main thing and you're like, photographer and you need to store tons of photos, then there you go. Who makes the M1 chip? Apple does. It's Apple's chip. They make it. That's the great thing is after all these years, Apple finally makes their own processor chip. Let's see. With the Magic Keyboard, is the touchscreen portable? I mean, yeah, because it still kind of folds up and stuff. So I guess that's the idea. Can Time Machine be wireless? Well, yeah, I mean, that doesn't really apply to this, but yeah, you can certainly have, if you have a sophisticated enough network hub, it can have a drive attached to it, and then you can select a network drive as a Time Machine backup. Oh, I wanted to talk about a couple more things about yesterday's stuff. Obviously, we got the Apple TV 4K, just a little bit improved there and a new remote, but AirTags. AirTags are kind of neat. We've been expecting them for a while. Now we know, we're going to get them. We can order them on Friday and get them next week. $29 for one, $99 for 4. A lot of people were predicting they were going to be more expensive. A lot of people were saying like $50 for an AirTag, with the idea being that there'll be third-party AirTags you can get cheaper. Apple would kind of be the high end, but you're basically down to $25 for one, which is decent. I don't know how that seems like a really low price for something that's got, a battery and a Bluetooth and all that stuff. Um, but really cool thing. They revealed a lot about how the privacy stuff works on it yesterday, and it's really fascinating. Basically, it's a thing for tracking things that you've lost. It's not good for tracking things that are stolen. And it's not good for tracking things that don't want to be tracked because of privacy concerns. The thing about, people are saying, well, if somebody steals something of yours and it's got one of these on it, there's a lot of ways for them to disable the AirTag. So it's not really good if somebody steals it. But those arguments don't hold water for me, because the whole idea is, if somebody steals a device and it's got an AirTag on it, they could just throw away the AirTag. You don't have to go to anything complex. People are talking about all these steps you can go to disable the AirTag when they steal something of yours. And it's like, you don't need to go through any steps. You just take the AirTag and you throw it away, and it stays there, and then you take the stolen thing this way. So the idea that, like, oh, it doesn't really work if something's stolen, who cares? It wouldn't work anyway. No thing you attach to something would work, because the thief could just get rid of it. But the tracking things that don't want to be tracked is really interesting. So if you slip one of these into somebody's bag or put it in somebody's car or something like that, what'll happen is it recognizes that it's not with you, the owner, number one, and then it recognizes that somebody else is kind of with it all the time. And it will first try to alert that person that, hey, did you know there's an AirTag that doesn't belong to you that seems to be with you all the time? And then even if it fails at doing that, because maybe the person doesn't have an iPhone, they it'll eventually start beeping. So the person's like, what's that beep? And why is this in my bag? That kind of thing. So they've done a lot to stop it from being used in bad ways, and leave it as a cool device for tracking your stuff. I plan on getting like 4 of these to start with. First one goes right on my dog's collar. So if he ever gets out of the yard, I'll be able to have another tool for finding him. And also, I'll probably stick one like in my in my bag that I carry with me everywhere when I either go for walks or, as my carry-on on an airplane, stuff like that. I'll probably just always have one in there just in case. And, think about other things that I may want to, and other places I may want to put it to. I may even try one out in one of our, we have an anti-theft GPS thing in our cars. And, that costs money because it's like, $100 a month for mobile phone service. I may try sticking an AirTag in the car and just see how well that works, and how, if that could replace it as a, something I have to pay annually for. So it'd be interesting to see also how it works with family stuff. Like, for instance, if it's registered to me and my wife drives the car, then is it going to be like complaining to her that this thing is tracking her? Or is it going to recognize that this is a family device, or that we're all part of one iCloud family plan, so that's okay? That kind of thing. Otherwise, it's going to be weird, because it'll be like, should I assign it to her? But then what if I'm driving the car? That kind of thing. We'll have to see. So excited about it, but there's still a lot of questions. Let's see. Other questions. How many screens could the new iMac run? It says it can run 2 at least, so it can have its own screen, and it can power the full 6K Apple XDR ProRes display. So you can have those 2. Now, if it can power a 6K display, the question is, can it power 2 4K displays? It doesn't say. So it'll be interesting to see if Apple was just basically using marketing speak, saying, yeah, you can power the one display that we sell with it, and it can also power other displays, or whether there is something about it that can only power one extra display. We'll have to see. Can it help you locate the car in the Mall of America's parking lot? Yes, it should be able to, very much so, because you leave it in your car, and as people walk by with iPhones, actually, you won't even have to worry about that. Even if nobody is around, it should be able to tell you, because it has your iPhone, and when you leave, it's going to lose communication with it, and it should say last known location was here. If you've ever done that with some other thing, like either AirPods or like a MacBook or something like that, and it will say like last known location. So yeah, very definitely. Yeah, and as Frank points out, you can already use your iPhone for that because it should remember, as long as you're using Bluetooth to connect to the car, I believe, then it kind of remembers where your car is. Um, let's see. Okay, so any other questions about Apple's announcements? And then maybe I'll show you some iMovie stuff.
I don't see any questions right now, Gary. Go ahead, and if they pop up, we'll warn you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so we could do iMovie. So there we go. So there's the new iMacs, all the different colors. So is the screen sharing up and going?
Yes.
Good, great. Okay, so there's all the new iMac colors and stuff. Really cool. Look how thin that thing is. I love how thin this is. Like I want one. Like I'm really racking my brain to find an excuse that I need to get one of these for, I mean, my wife wants a new MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air actually. And now I'm like, should MacBook Air, that's really what she needs. But should I be trying to convince her to get one of these just so I can have one? I don't know. We'll see. So let's go and look at iMovie. Here we go. Great. So I know at least one person wanted to hear some stuff about, I want to bring up the chat here, just make sure I can see the chat. I know at least one person wanted to hear some audio stuff. So actually I'm going to start with that. So let's say in iMovie, you've got 2 clips. And let's say in this scene I'm creating here, there's a plane landing. And the plane's landing, and the idea is the character in this video you're creating is coming home to their dog, which is anxiously awaiting their arrival. And now the tricky thing is here is I don't think you can't hear my audio, can you?
No.
Can you hear that?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you can. Great. Fantastic. So this will make a lot more sense then.
Just vaguely.
Oh, barely? Well, maybe let me get it up. Maybe you're just hearing over my speakers. So in this first clip, we've got the sound of a plane landing, right? It would look weird if you didn't hear the plane engines as the plane lands. And in this clip, you've got the dog barking. Now, when we make movies in iMovie, typically, this is how we just have it. It cuts from one to the other. But if you pay attention when you watch TV or movies, that's not how it works. When a professional video editor actually creates something in a real TV show or movie, sound actually transitions between 2 scenes. So you would actually hear, in this case, most likely, the dog bark before you saw the dog. We have 3 barks right here at the beginning. You can see them here in the, this waveform here. And typically, what happened is you would hear that first bark while you were still watching the plane come in. Let's actually shrink the plane down, the clip with the plane down to give it some extra room. And what we're going to do is attach a transition, cross dissolve, between these. Now, what will happen is the video and the audio will dissolve from one to the other. So for like a split second there, you see a cross dissolve between the plane and the dog, and the sound is also cross dissolving a little bit, but that's still not what you actually see when you watch TV or movies. What happens when you watch TV or movies is typically they just go from one to the other. It's called jump cut. You're not dissolving or doing a wipe or anything fancy like that. It just goes from one scene to the other. But the audio does overlap. And this is called either an L cut or a J cut, depending upon which one you do, or both. So what we want is we want the dog to start barking while we still see the plane landing. And in addition to that, we still hear a little bit of the plane landing sound as we first are introduced to the dog. So I'm going to double click on the divider here. And this brings up the precision editor where we see both. Here's the plane landing, and you can see here's the end part that I cut out. I didn't need all of this. And here's the dog barking, and you can see that starts right at the beginning. I can adjust each one of these to get it to just the right point. So let's have the actual dog introduced just before he barks the second time. And the plane will cut out right here without showing us the rest. So basically, as soon as the plane kind of is off the top of the screen there, let's see, you can around when the plane leaves. So that's all fine, but still you could see here, not only does the visual part cut out and go to the next scene at this line here, but so does the audio. But the audio doesn't have to. We've got two different lines here, one for the audio, one for the video. I could actually move the audio line and have the audio for the plane continue to play past the point where the visual for the plane is gone. And I can have the audio for the dog start before the dog appears. Not only that, but there's a little dot at the top of the line there. And if I move my cursor over just right, I can grab that dot and move that dot around. And that's the fade in. So I can do a slight fade in to fade just to the point where it's at full volume when the dog starts barking. And I could grab that dot here, and it's tricky to grab it, but you grab it and have it fade out starting right when the plane visually leaves. So now you've got the dog should bark while the plane is still there, and we'll still hear the plane for a little bit as it fades out while the dog is visible. I'm going to hit enter, and now we get that result. So the dog barked before we saw the dog. And now that I've shown you that, you'll probably start noticing that all the time in TV and movies, that they overlap the sound like that. And now you know how to do it in iMovie. And it's the kind of subtle thing that you show somebody your finished product, they're not going to go and say, hey, you had the sound overlap. That was really cool. They won't even notice it. They'll just kind of think that, hey, that was pretty good looking. Like that video was really well done. I don't know what it was about it, but something about it seemed really professional. So that's how to do that. And that's one of the things that it's so great that iMovie has that feature in there, because you wouldn't expect to find it in iMovie. You would expect it to be in Final Cut Pro, but not iMovie. And it's there, just that so many people don't know it's there and don't know how to use it. Any questions about that?
I don't see any questions. If you do,
You can ask at the end too. Oh, yeah.
Deborah,
Yes,
you have a
actually,
question?
Yeah, I do. That was my question that Gary was talking about. I do use iMovie a lot. I don't use video clips. I have mostly photos. So I have lots of transitions between each photo. And what I wanted to know was from my audio, when you have, before you pull the audio down into your iMovie, you can play it and listen to it up in the work area. And is there a way to pull a segment out of there if you want to repeat a chorus of the song, for instance? Is there a way to pull a segment out of there? And then I don't always get the smoothest transition down in my bar down here where you are.
Yeah, I mean, if you draw it in, of course you can cut it to wherever you want, like that. You can even use the video commands like Command B to do a break there and cut it where you want, and then Option drag to repeat and all that. But you're right, it's not very fine controls here. You could go all the way to the maximum zoom in here and really kind of work with it carefully, and you can go down to a frame level. Which is like if you're doing 30 frames a second, that's 1/30 of a second, which is great for video because it's it's single frame. Audio though tends to be a little more subtle in terms of our hearing. Like inside of a 1/30 of a second, you might be able to hear just a little bit too much of a loop or too little of a loop or something like that. If you want really high level of control, I would suggest using GarageBand first. So learn how to use. Do you use GarageBand at all?
I have not used it yet.
So GarageBand, that's your precision tool for editing audio. And what you could do with GarageBand is you can go bring audio into GarageBand, and then you really have fine control over it, and you can easily loop things and do things with it. And then when you're done with it, you're satisfied with how your loop sounds or whatever it is, then you can kind of export that from GarageBand at the length that you want. So if you say you had 30 seconds of audio and you wanted to loop it 5 times to be 2.5 minutes, you could do that all in GarageBand to get your sound right. Maybe even go, to 3 minutes so you have some extra. And then when that sounds perfect, it's like, good, this is a song, this is like a looping audio thing I want to use in lots of slideshows. Then you can export it as one piece of audio, bring that into iMovie, and then hopefully you get to use that over and over again in iMovie. And so maybe you create a few of those and all, because yeah, you're only going to get so much precision for looping audio in iMovie.
Okay, I'll give the Garage, I haven't played with GarageBand. I'll give that a try.
It's fun.
I,
GarageBand is like the most fun app on the Mac, I think. You get to create all sorts of fun things.
Okay,
So.
thank you so much.
Sure. All right, so let me show you some other stuff here. I want to show you some cool visual effects that you can do in iMovie. So let's go and take another sample. So here's a woman on a train. And now you can apply all sorts of effects to this. Let's go here to, one thing we can do is we can go here to colors, and I can adjust colors. So you can see I can adjust the colors here, various things, and tint it. You can also go to this white balance, the skin tone balance, and do adjustments there. But the big thing here you can do is the clip filters, this one. Go to clip filter, and you have a selection of filters. Now, it doesn't look like a big selection. I mean, when you think of something like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere, where you could have, almost, infinite types of different things, just having this small selection of filters doesn't seem that impressive. And a lot of them are like really like this duotone or sci-fi or negative, like things you probably wouldn't use normally. You might go and use like Blockbuster or vintage or Western or something like that, as opposed to like an artistic effect like Comic Cool or Comic Ink. So there's not that much here that you can use, but you can combine things to create a lot more. For instance, let's go ahead and create something with sepia. I'm just going to create this kind of effect, but there's nothing to prevent me from then going into the color adjustments and actually adjusting the color as well. So I can have sepia or any one of those and also adjust color. So instead of seeing this effect that is just like, people look at it and say, oh, I know that iMovie effect, you can apply color adjustments and then it doesn't look like everybody else's iMovie. You can also combine effects in interesting ways. So let's go and reset everything here and change the clip filter back to none. Let's say I took this clip here and used it as picture in picture, or not picture in picture, but an overlay. You would normally do that by dragging another clip in and putting it on top. So for instance, I could drag this clip in here, I could throw it on top, and it's a cutaway, right? But what if I had the same clip as the cutaway? I don't have to drag this clip in again. I can hold the Option key down, and that would drag a copy, which normally I could have as like a second copy right here. But I could also put the copy on top like that. So a cutaway from one clip to the same clip. And if I line it up perfectly on top, it'll snap in place. I've got a cutaway on top of the regular video. It's the same thing. I'm layering two of the same thing on top. But let me show you how you can use this to create really cool visual effects. I'm going to take the overlay here. And by the way, you have to make sure it's set to cutaway. If it's set to picture in picture, it'll look like that. It'll have a little inlaid picture there. Cutaway will perfectly cover it. Now, if I go to clip filter, and let's use a clip filter on this overlay. There it goes. Let's use Comic Ink. There's Comic Ink. Now, the overlay is completely covering the main timeline video, which is normal. If I move this out of the way, I can see it's normal. If I put this back in place, I can see this is the Comic Ink on top. But the cool thing about cutaways is you can set the opacity level. So I can make the overlay semi-transparent, and I could blend the two together. So with something like this Comic Ink, I could have a subtle Comic Ink on top of the regular video. And I could set it up to be like that. So there's an effect that you won't normally see, kind of a Comic Ink blended with a regular video. And I can still adjust either one of these. I can still go down to this level, for instance, and I could adjust the color here or apply another filter to the main one. So I can make this one a, blue filter. And now I have comic ink over blue, and I could still adjust the opacity here to change that. And I could still go ahead and adjust the colors for it and other things. So you can do all sorts of cool effects. You can even transition between one or the other, because if I were to move the left side, not the entire thing, you could see how it keeps the timing the same. So it's still perfectly overlaid. So I can basically bring the front and end. So I can have the clip start off with just that blue filter and then jump to the overlay of the ink. But I've got these dots here. I could pull those dots in and fade. So now I can get a fade in effect, and it fades into my comic ink effect and then out of it again. So that gives you all sorts of things. Everything gets multiplied. Suddenly, all of those clip filters now are multiplied because you can use one or two of them and blend them together. And then you can add color tinting and things to it to do all sorts of effects, change the opacity of the overlay to have more or less of it. And now instead of having, this handful of like 24 effects that you could use, you've got thousands of different options that you can actually use and combine and play with and have fun. So let's see here. iMovie doesn't have blend modes. No, it just has the opacity here. So you can, you have to let me select that. For the overlay, you just have this one, the percentage amount. There's no like, you can't multiply or add or any of that stuff. So so removing intermittent noises from audio, it's tough to do. You could do it, of course, manually. Now, I talked about GarageBand before in terms of creating audio first and then bringing that into iMovie. You can also use GarageBand to edit the audio in a completed video. So you can create a video in iMovie, finish it all off, and then say, the last thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of, there's like one point where you can hear a pencil on a surface near the camera. I'm going to get rid of that, right? So what you can do is when you're finished, you can open up the video in iMovie. The video in GarageBand, which is like, seems like doesn't make any sense. GarageBand edits audio. How can you open up a video in it? There's a mode for GarageBand. I won't go into it here because it'll be a whole like 20-minute thing to go into it. But you can open up a video in GarageBand and it will allow you to edit the audio track like it's a regular GarageBand audio track, keeping the video in sync with it the whole time. And when you're done, you export back out as video, but with the new soundtrack in there. So then you can get in detail, find that little pencil hit, where it's making that sound, and get rid of it or lower the volume on that section or whatever to smooth that out. So that's like the extreme thing if you want to go in and edit, the sound very carefully for that. Yeah, so I have some videos on that. I think one's pretty recent that you can go into. Try to remember how long ago that would have been. So. And let's see here. Editing a video soundtrack in GarageBand from 2009 is probably not the one that we want. So I think I've done one more recently. So I don't know where that one is. So yeah, maybe I haven't done one recently. I mean, it hasn't changed much since 2009, but although I have changed much since 2009, as you can see. But the I would look for that, or I thought I had a more recent one. Hey, if that's my most recent one on doing it, that means I'm probably going to do another one in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to add that to my list. What else can I show you in iMovie? Here's something subtle, more subtle. Suppose you have two clips that are supposed to be part of the same movie, but they look different. Notice this clip here, the desert, somebody hiking in the desert, and then we go to this clip of where they end up by a waterfall. Now, if you look, the colors here are a lot brighter. The colors here are more red, deeper color than this here. which is a little jarring. And again, something you don't see in TV and movies. You don't go from like one color palette like this to another color palette. Now, why are the colors different? It could be they were shot with different cameras. Like one was shot with your iPhone 7 and another was shot with your iPhone 10, in different years. Or maybe one was shot with, one person's phone and another person's phone. Maybe one was shot with a digital, camera and another was shot with an iPhone. Lots of reasons. Or it could simply be this was shot at 10 a.m. and this was shot at 4 p.m. And this was shot when there were clouds and this was shot when it was completely clear. Lots of reasons that the colors don't seem to match, but there's color matching in iMovie. So what you could do here is you could say, well, I like this. I like how the deep reds are here. Can we make this look more like this, right? Because the rocks are the same. The colors are really the same, just the lighting has changed. And you don't want to show that in your video. Your video is not supposed to look like it's 2 different days or two different times a day. It's supposed to look like this happened 10 minutes later. The person hiked to where the waterfall was. So color matching, how does that work? Well, first go into the one you want to change and click to set the location of the timeline there. So there we go. Then we're going to go to the color. I've got the little zoom thing in the way. There we go. Let's go to color matching, which is, here, match color. Click match color. So here's our finished product. Now we want to go and select another frame where we want to draw it from. You can see the little eyedropper tool. So we'll pick somewhere in here and we'll click there and it's going to redo the color for this to make it match that. And you can see how those reds come out. If I like what I've done, I hit the checkbox there. And now I look and I see this whole clip is now color adjusted. So it matches this one closer. This is best used when the change is more subtle. In other words, if you're going from like a scene in a city to a scene in the desert, then what's going to be color match? It's perfectly fine for the colors to certainly shift because you're in a different place. But if the colors are different because the lighting changed and things like that, but it's really supposed to be kind of the same red rocks and all that, then it works really well. So it's something you may want to think about. If you're editing your video in iMovie and you're like, all right, I'm liking where this is going. How can I make it better? Then start looking at color matching to try to get this to do better. So a few other things, if people are up for it, for showing in iMovie, or maybe actually, I think these are the main things I wanted to cover, and I wanted to leave plenty of time for Q&A. So I'll let you guys decide. Do you want me to do another 10 minutes of iMovie or go to Q&A?
We have time. You do have time to do about 10 minutes of iMovie, but you do have a question. Bill, go ahead and ask your question. Bill, you've unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, Gary, I wonder if you could just comment a bit more on the new iMac. You indicated, I guess the basic one is either 8 or 16. And I think you indicated that 8 gigabytes would be sufficient for most things. I'm just a kind of a hobby user. Would you just confirm that 8 gigabytes would be suitable?
Yeah, my M1 MacBook Pro is 8 gigs, and I use iMovie and Numbers and multiple apps at the same time just fine. It's always good to have more memory, but if it's like, I don't really want to push the price up too high, will 8 gigs work fine? Then my answer is yes. If you had extra money to spend, I would spend it first on storage, right? Very rarely do I hear somebody say, boy, I'm having trouble because I didn't buy enough memory when I got my new Mac. I hear that occasionally, right? But usually it's pretty obvious. Like, oh, I use Final Cut Pro to edit like 30-minute, TV shows. I should have got more memory. It's like, yeah, you should have realized you got more memory. But I don't really hear that from home users. However, I hear all the time that people bought too little storage. Like they didn't buy, they always get more storage than you think you need. Your storage requirements are going to go up. Everything storage wise goes up. We went from shooting, pretty small digital photos to bigger digital photos. We shoot mostly 4K video now. That's like standard, it's fast becoming the standard, and all the new iPhones do it and have for a while. Things take up more space. than they did before. We have some, the tide moves in the other direction too a little bit, because now we suddenly have HEIC and HEIF formats for photos, which means the photos look just as good as before, if not better, but take up less space, which is nice. But still, the biggest thing I hear about, purchasing issues when somebody buys a Mac and they're not happy with it is because they didn't buy enough storage. So spend bucks first getting a little more storage, and then after you're sure you've got enough storage, your next money could be spent on more memory if you think you'll be doing lots of intense stuff like, editing lots of video or using lots of multiple apps or third-party apps that, seem to take up a lot of memory, like, or even something like Logic, if you
What
use
about
Logic.
Final Cut Pro? Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Final Cut Pro on my MacBook Pro without any issues. So, I mean, I think it works. I think it would work better if you had 16 gigs, but it's not a deal breaker. So you have to think about, like, do you do Final Cut Pro professionally on your MacBook Pro, or like you're going to get a new iMac? Do you do Final Cut Pro professionally? If so, then 16 gigs is probably a good bet. Of course, then you might actually then be waiting for, either a more advanced Mac anyway than these first ones, the M1 Macs. But if you don't, if it's like I use Final Cut Pro for fun and to create like neat things, and if it's going to take 20 minutes to render out a long video instead of 15 or something like that, then okay, that's not going to be a big issue for me. Then you probably could get by with 8 gigs. But if you've got the money, I mean, a lot of it's all money dependent, right? For some people, the difference between 8 gigs and 16 gigs, isn't it like $200 or something? I think it's $200. For some people, it's like $200 for a Mac that they're going to have for 5 years is like nothing, no big deal. So go get the 16 gigs, but for other people, it's like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how do I afford, I'm going to get a new iMac. Okay, the base model is $1,299. That's tight. That's really tight for me. Then don't worry about going up from that base model. If it's already tight to get to spend $1,299, then you do that. All these purchasing decisions, they all have just all these different elements, right? I mean, otherwise, there would just be one model of Mac, right? It would be like a big, huge portable Mac with tons of memory and storage, and that would be the one thing that Apple sells. But there's all these variations because people have to weigh budget versus needs versus future needs and all these other things.
All right, Gary, you have 3 votes for iMovie.
Okay, I'll do some iMovie, and I do see there's some other questions. So let me show you some other stuff in iMovie. Let me show you some titling stuff. So a lot of people complain that titling is difficult in iMovie because there's not that many options. Let's bring in just a sample video here. And let's say you want to add a title. Go to titles, and you have these options for titles. That's not much. I mean, considering that in something like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro, you have not only more than this, but you can basically just place text anywhere you want on the screen. Whereas here, it doesn't seem you can. If I'm going to place some text anywhere I want, there is no option for that. Just add text, an added text box. It's all these specific things: side, lower third, and focus, and reveal, and pop-up, and gravity, and all this stuff. But you can use some tricks to convert some of these to place it text anywhere you want. So there are 3 in particular. There's centered, lower, and upper that are really just basic pieces of text. So let's start with upper. And if I put upper here, what I get is some text here at the top. So I'm a little limited here because I've got my screen kind of set up for some nicer, look for when I'm doing I didn't want to hit that. Sorry. I've got it set up. So this is pretty small, but you can see there's it says name as the sample, and it's in the upper left-hand corner. If I wanted it to be in the lower right-hand corner, I could do the lower instead of upper. But let's say I want it to be in the lower left-hand corner, or the upper right-hand corner, or in the middle here. I could still do that by selecting this. You can't quite see there at the top, but I can just add a bunch of extra returns and push this down. And now you can see I pushed it down there. So it's just a bunch of blank spaces, and that's where that is. I could also justify it to the right and move it to the right. And then I can get rid of a bunch of those extra returns. Let's right justify it again. Sorry, I have to do that on that line. So now I can put it over there. So you could see how I could use extra returns and right and left justify or center that matter like that to really place the text anywhere I want using the upper one. And you could do the same thing with lower or centered. You could really play with where the text goes. So it's not ideal. It's not as easy to use, but you can do it. You're not really restricted. I like to use the upper one, as you can tell. So I just use upper all the time and place that there. And then you have lots of other options too. You've got, of course, the font you can choose, but even at the bottom here, if you don't like any of those fonts, you can go to show fonts and it brings up the font controls and you've got more fonts to choose from and options and things like that. So you can really do a lot of different things with this to get it to be basically text anywhere you want. Plus, you don't have to just put standard boring text. You could do something like use emoji. So one of the things that people like to do sometimes, especially like on YouTube or something, is put little symbols on the screen. Like suppose the video is of you talking about something and you want to show like a positive symbol, like a thumbs up. You'll see that appear on video. So you can do Control-Command-Space, which brings up the emoji and special character viewer. The same command you use in Pages or Messages or Mail, just Control-Command-Space. And now I can choose any emoji I want, like thumbs up, and the thumbs up emoji is there. Let's make it something a lot bigger, like that. And now I could use the stuff I was showing before, like I could left justify it, add a bunch of extra returns, and I think I actually did a few too many returns. Let's see here. Oh, I think I actually typed over it. So there's the thumbs up again. Left justify. There, so you get a little thumbs up there on the screen. Now, this is exactly the kind of thing where, imagine this is a video of you talking, and then you said something and you wanted to put a little cool thumbs up that appears there really quick and goes away. You can have that, or smiley face, or any emoji you want to express an emotion, and you could place that anywhere you want on the video, any corner or whatever, just by using extra spacing or right justify to do that. So there's that. There's also titles that you can get to that are hidden inside of iMovie, and the way that they're hidden is they're hidden inside of the trailers. So when you go to create a new project in iMovie, you get iMovie, which is like standard video, start from a blank slate, and you get these trailers. And I don't particularly like these trailers. They're kind of like fun things to create. If you want to take a bunch of video clips and create something fun, you have these you can choose. They're neat, but nothing I really ever use. However, each one of these has its own unique set of cool titles. So let's pick one out, like this superhero one here. Let me go and create a trailer superhero, and I'm not even going to do anything with it. It's got by default here, if I go to the storyboard or shot list, I could play this and you can see it's going to place all this stuff. It's just a template and you drag and drop stuff in there. I'm not going to even worry about that. I just wanted to create it, and I'll just say, yeah, give it the default name Superfamily. Now I can click here and I could say convert trailer to iMovie. And this is a feature that allows you to take a trailer, and maybe when you're done with it, you want to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. You can convert it to a regular iMovie project, and now you can actually edit it in iMovie, which also means you can copy and paste things from this to something else. So look at these pieces of text here. Like, look at this little piece of text that appears like that. That is not something that's a typical title, but it is there in iMovie. It's only hidden in this trailer. I'm going to copy that. Select it, Command-C to copy it. I'm going to go back out to projects and go to my movie here, and I'm going to paste it in. And here it is inside my regular iMovie project. And I can select it, and guess what? The text is editable. So now I've changed the word that's in there, and I could use that. And every one of those trailers has 2 or 3 different unique titles. So you can go through them and see kind of what you like. And if there's something like this where you're like, oh, I'd really like to use that in my iMovie project, you can steal it that way. You could even, if you want, go ahead and create an iMovie project that is just some, blank video or a blank background, and steal all the bits of all the titles that you want from all of these different, converted trailer things to create your own little library of, copy and paste titles. There's one. Even the music here, this superhero soundtrack, you can now copy and paste that out from this project and use it in your own. So you can grab elements like that. So I think that's what Frank asked about, the coming attraction set. Is that what you talked about, the trailer stuff? I mean, basically, the trailers have limited use, but you can steal things from them. That's the only time I ever use them. So let's see, questions. Import AVCHD from Canon. Yes, I think that old format is unsupported. I think you need to convert it. So I haven't worked with that stuff in more than a decade, the old AVCHD format. But if you can open it in QuickTime Pro, QuickTime Player, if you can open it in QuickTime Player, then just open it in QuickTime Player, export it out. If you can't open it in QuickTime Player, you're going to need another app. A free one you could use is VLC. You can get the VLC app online. Let's see, VLC, Mac. Yeah, the videoland.org. It's a free app. It's a video player that allows you to put a playlist of videos together and play it, do these other things, but it has built into it a converter. So you can just bring one video in or a bunch of videos in and say, convert these to another format and just convert it to standard H.264 video. That's what you're probably going to need to do to get that format into iMovie.
All right, Gary, you have a question from Alan and Barbara. Alan, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, my question is back to the opening topic about all the new machines and stuff. Is that a good question to ask now?
Yes.
Okay. With the new machine, with the new MacBook Pro, I'm now wondering about the issue of a MacBook Pro versus a MacBook Air with the same amount of storage, the same amount of memory, maybe even the same size screen. What is the trade-off in a Pro versus an Air?
Well, one of the big things about the difference is fans. So the MacBook Air has no fans. It basically, it just self-cools. The heat should be pushed out on its own, whereas the MacBook Pro has fans in it. That's one of the reasons the case is a different size, because they can miniaturize lots of things, but fans still have to be fans. They have to be little spinning things in there. So now, do you need fans? That's the question, because it used to be with the Intel chips that the MacBook Airs without fans, they would get hot. And there's no way for it to cool without fans. So basically what would happen is the processor would slow itself down to make sure it didn't overheat. So while you had a capable processor in it, maybe you were doing something like editing video that was not, that it wasn't able to handle at a reasonable temperature. So it basically slowed itself down to keep itself cool. Whereas the MacBook Pro was able to say, oh, it's getting too hot, just rev up those fans. And now I can, keep the processor going at full speed and cool it using fans. However, what people have observed and what I've observed is that the M1 MacBook Pros just don't use those fans much. Matter of fact, there's been videos of people just trying to get the fans on. Like, here I am, I'm rendering iMovie. I got, something, I'm browsing Facebook. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I still can't get the fans to go on. And, finally they add enough stuff and it's like, oh, now I can hear the fans. Finally, after throwing all of this at the processor, the fans are on. In the Intel processor, the fans would have been on the instant you started rendering video. So it's less crucial now than before to get a MacBook Air versus MacBook Pro. Now, otherwise, the MacBook Pro, I'm trying to remember what else is different from it besides those fans. You've got, it comes default with the 8-core chip GPU instead of a 7-core GPU. It's got, I think, a little bit better battery life, maybe, because it's got maybe more room for battery. Just looking through these, I'll just do another tab here. Apple, Mac, Air, and then tech specs. So here we've got, yeah, so you can get either one. You can get the 7-core GPU or the 8-core GPU, but you're gonna have to pay more for the 8-core GPU, whereas the MacBook Pro comes with that by default. Battery power, see 17 hours for the Pro, 15 hours for the Air. So again, it's probably a bigger battery is what is getting you that there. Now you have two Thunderbolt or USB 4 ports. You've got same thing here. Storage is going to be different. So you can go up to 2 terabytes. And here, oh no, I take it back. It's not different. You can still go up to 2 terabytes. So you can see very little difference there. Those are the main differences. Oh, you've got the touch bar. That's another big thing. So the touch bar is MacBook Pro, not MacBook Air. The MacBook Air, you just have the Touch ID. I don't know if it's going to show a picture of it here, but you've got Touch ID on the MacBook Air. So yeah, the Touch ID sensor, that's it. So that's another thing. If you like the touch bar, then you need the MacBook Pro. So MacBook Pro gets you touch bar, gets you a slightly bigger battery, and gets you fans in case you need them. Prices aren't really going to be that different. I mean, if you're going to go with a MacBook Air that is going to have the bigger processor in it, or the slightly faster processor with the 8-core GPU, then that's going to bump the price up, and you're going to be looking at maybe a couple $100 difference. So not too much. So yeah, you got to decide which one you want. I've got the MacBook Pro. I probably could have gotten the MacBook Air. I was thinking when I bought it that I'd want the fans, but now I'm thinking probably didn't need that, since I don't think I've ever heard the fans go on unless I've tried to get them going on by doing tons of things at the same time, just for the purpose of getting the fans going on.
So just for curiosity, if you know now that you don't need the fan, would you have bought the Pro anyway, or would you have bought the Air?
I probably would have bought the Pro because of the touch bar, because and that's specific to me. I mean, this is a good example of how it's specific to everybody. As the Mac most guy, I occasionally need to do videos about using the touch bar. So I need a Mac that has a touch bar. So getting the MacBook Pro made sense, because now I've got the Mac, in addition to this being my travel computer, my sit on the sofa computer, and the only M1 machine I have right now. It also is my computer that has touch bar on it. So I can keep up to date and try things out with the touch bar on it to do my videos on the touch bar. But that's not going to be true for most other people. However, if you're if you work with music, or you do a lot of video or whatever, and you've used the touch bar before and you like all those extra controls, having those buttons change for that, then touch bar may be just as important to you as well.
Okay,
If
now
it wasn't for
one last thing on price.
Yeah.
Are the prices, we're talking about difference of a couple of hundred or 1,000, or what's the difference in prices of
well, like if you look, see here, it's the MacBook Pro. We look at the base model MacBook Pro, which has got the 8-core GPU, and it's $12.99. And we go to the MacBook Air, and we look at the price for that. And we want to go to compare apples to apples, literally. We can look here at the MacBook Air, and it's, for this one, to get the 8-core GPU, it's $12.49. Now, $12.99 gets you 256 gigs. So it's not exactly the same. It's not quite, let's see, to get it the same would be like $14.99. So yeah, you're talking like $200, $300 for the lowest end, $250 for the next, depending on how you measure it. It's like $250, $300 difference between the two models. And of course, the Air is also slightly lighter. I think it's half a pound lighter. So there's that as well. I'll be buying an M1 MacBook Air. Like I mentioned before, my wife's going to be getting one here shortly, because to replace her iMac, her aging iMac. Air is perfect for her. She doesn't edit video. She does occasionally edit photos, and she surfs the web, emails, does research and things like that. Maintains a couple of different things on websites. No real reason I could see to get a MacBook Pro for her, but I do want to get her the lightest machine possible. And battery life really isn't an issue because most of the time she'll be using it'll probably be plugged in anyway. So she'll definitely be getting. I don't know. I probably won't get her this level. I'll probably get her this MacBook Air here, the 1249 version, to make sure she's got enough storage for her needs, mostly for that. So yeah, different for different people. That's why Apple makes all these variations.
All right, thank you, Alan, for your question. Jim Korska, you are next.
Hi, Gary. I just kind of completed a video project of capturing some videotapes from 25, 30 years ago using a video capture device and QuickTime Movie. I mean, the only drawback was I had to do it in real time. I couldn't do it in fast time or anything like that. And frankly, I'm grateful to have been able to capture some 30-year-old memories because I thought the videotapes might have been deteriorated. But having said that, the image that I get is only satisfactory. Can I improve things like contrast, brightness, color, that sort of thing with a QuickTime Movie using iMovie?
I mean, you could try. The thing about videotape is it's really, it's first of all, it's standard definition, of course. Back in videotape days, we didn't talk about pixels and things because that didn't really apply, but it's roughly equivalent to 640 480 video, or 720 480 video, which when you think about HD video is 1920 by 1080.
Right.
That's like, and then 4K is 3840 by 2160. I mean, that's like incredible. I mean, when you multiply those out, how many more pixels? It's like, yeah. Every time my family digs out a DVD and says, "Hey, we got this movie on DVD, let's watch it." I'm like, really? Can't we rent it?
Yeah.
And they're like, "We own it. Why should we pay a few dollars to rent it?" I'm like, because it's standard definition. And they're like, "Oh, is it really that different?" I'm like, yes, to me, it seems really that different. Watching on our 4K TV, a standard definition video is almost painful to me. But there's only so much you can do. You certainly can try to adjust the contrast. That is an interesting thing to try. I mean, you have in iMovie those things, where you can go in and let's see.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Gary, but is it?
No, it's okay.
Is it as simple as dragging the QuickTime Movie into iMovie?
You drag it into iMovie and you're just going to get exactly what you have now. However, what you can try is drag into iMovie, like this video here. Try this tool right here, this little magic wand tool. Tap that, and that sets it up with auto. Same thing here, and it will adjust things. Now, of course, this is a professional video clip that I downloaded, so you're not going to see that much difference. But notice when I turn audio on, it still does some adjustment. Try to see what happens when you do auto. For the auto adjustment, that will adjust color there. And you could try some of these other things as well. And you can even try in here, but I mean, all you can do is just try and play around with it and see what you come up with. I mean, to me, it sounds like a fun project to just try and see what you can come up with. And if you come up with like a good set, like, oh, if I hit auto and then I go in here and everything seems to be tinted a little bit, or, this is where you would adjust contrast, by the way, right here. Like if it's like, so if you play around with it for a while and find out hitting auto and then moving this top dot here just beyond the line gets you the results you want, now you know that. And every time that you go in and want to work with one of these videos, or if you wanted to actually, go into iMovie, take each video in, make those two adjustments, and then export from there, you could do that and, clean up your video that way. Or you might find out that it doesn't really, you don't like it. Like anything you do doesn't seem to make it any better, which is fine. And it's good to know that. It's good to know that you tried. So experiment and play around.
These have a .mov suffix on them, not an MP4 suffix. Does it make any difference?
Doesn't make any difference. That's you always think of a file as like an envelope that contains something inside. And the file extension is kind of like the envelope color or type. It doesn't, it doesn't tell you what's inside. You could have H.264 video inside a file that has a name .mov or a file that has a name .mp4. It's what's inside that matters. And MP4, MOV, M4V, they all kind of overlap as to what types of things they could hold. So it usually doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Jim, for your question. All right, it is 12:45, and George, would you like to take over now? George?
George, okay, thank you very much. Gary, this has really been a pleasure today. We
Oh, sure.
really appreciate your being here. And if everybody could unmute themselves and thank Gary.
Oh, thank you, Gary. It was
Outstanding as usual.
Gary,
Great program, Gary.
Well done,
Gary.
Great program, Gary.
And thanks everybody to your support too. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Anybody have anything else to say? Have a great week. Stay well. And Gary, thanks again.
Thanks. Everybody have a great day.